COVID-19 and the government's response to it have changed all of our lives. In at least one case, the pandemic has helped lead to the creation of a new group focusing on social and economic research. Joining us now to discuss that group is its founder and president, Jeffrey Tucker. Thanks for taking time to talk to us.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
So why form this new group, the Brownstone Institute for Social and Economic Research?
Well, it had to happen. I mean, our lives changed fundamentally on March 12th. I would say even March 8th, 2020. And we entered into a new era of history. You know, a time when our liberties were no longer taken for granted, where everything became questionable, where our churches could be closed, where our schools could be shut down, where the ruling class could take away 2 years of education from children, block our travel, and make it impossible for our friends from Paris or London to come visit us, to exclude us from public spaces based on medicine that they believe we should take, and which many scientists say we shouldn't take. So this is a new world, and it's all about public health and its interaction with the meaning of liberty. And I was writing about this so much that at some point I realized I needed to focus on this exclusively, because this is going to determine a lot of the future of freedom and the future of civilization itself. So that's what the Brownstone Institute is about. And I've gathered all kinds of scientists around me. I've met all kinds of new people. And honestly, I must say, I've been involved in, philosophical, intellectual pursuits my entire life. I've never seen a group that's more diverse in terms of its political leanings. And I have people writing for me, whose politics I don't even know anything about, actually. They may be left, they may be right. I really don't care. The central theme is human rights, essential freedoms, and good public health and good science.
We're going to talk a little bit more about what the Brownstone Institute hopes to do, but first, the name. Why name yourself after a brownstone?
Wow. Okay. I'm so glad you asked that question. I don't get a chance to explain this enough. So brownstone was a stone that was very commonly used in the 19th century to build tall buildings before we had steel. Steel was a great innovation over, for example, iron, which is way too heavy and tended to sink into the ground. Steel made possible the skyscrapers and new bridges and that sort of thing. But before then, people use this stuff called brownstone, especially particularly in the Northeast. It has no grain in it, so it was a malleable stone, really durable, but it could be cut in any direction, and therefore architects would be very creative. And so if you look in New England, especially at a lot of the churches, the tall churches and the tall civic buildings, they're all made out of brownstone. So that's I mean, even today you go to Washington, D.C. and Georgetown, there's brownstone everywhere. So it was the sort of the building block of I would say, like from about 1810 to about 1870 was a really important kind of foundation of cities, and it was a part of the architectural look of what it was like to live as a modern person. And I like that. The other word for brownstone is freestone, which is great, precisely because it can be cut in many different directions. But so I think we're having to go back to fundamentals here. So the idea of brownstone is to revisit the foundations of what it is we're supposed to agree upon and believe as a community, as a society, and to revisit those foundations, because we've lost those foundations. So I think going back to that time at the birth of the modern is really important now. We need to rediscover the principles of the founding, the principles of the Enlightenment, get optimistic about the use of science within the framework of integrity, and deal with crises like pandemics within the framework of freedom and human rights. Those are all things that we discovered in the 19th century that we've somehow weirdly forgotten in the 21st century. So the idea of brownstone is to recall those foundations and rebuild them.
Based on what you're saying now, I could tell that although brownstone was inspired by the COVID-19 pandemic, that's not going to be the only focus. You're not just going to spend all your time talking about why the government's response to COVID-19 has been bad.
Right, and we do a lot of that, but we're gradually moving forward. I'm fascinated to see how all this is playing out, really. But you see what's happening here. The response to COVID has led to a kind of economic policy changes within monetary policy and spending, and it's created a supply chain crisis, and now we've got the ports clogged, now the labor shortage, and now inflation. So in a way, these are all connected topics, right? So yeah, Brownstone is now starting to deal more in economic subjects, and we're going to have to deal more with issues of moral concerns and things like the use of moral courage in public life and the integrity of science. And now you see these mass firings where we're talking more about the problem of dissent, within science and how free society should deal with it. So yeah, it's migrating more and more into a kind of a broader philosophical paradigm that's really trying to rethink a lot of the essential foundations of what I'd like to just call liberalism itself. But I'm letting this unfold naturally and normally just to see where it goes. And we've got big ideas for journals, Journal of Public Health, Journal of Economics, Journal of Politics and political philosophy. So there's a lot of things in the works.
As you chat with me, some people might see this and say to themselves, okay, this is on the website of the Carolina Journal, the John Locke Foundation. This must be another right-wing group. Convince people you're not just another right-wing group.
You're right. I don't know what the term right wing means anymore. And it's just from my experience, just simply not true. I have so many people writing for me whose politics I'm not actually interested in. They just have really good and intelligent insights, and they're against the lockdowns, very curious about what happens when you put a scientific technocratic elite in charge of other people's lives. And they don't like that. And that being against that is not a left-wing position or a right-wing position. It's, I would say, like a human position. So I do have writers. Tom Harrington wrote an article called "The Fearful Class" the other day. It was one of the most insightful pieces I've ever read about understanding like what went wrong with the ruling class values, that they would have believed that you could just lock people down and turn off an economy without any effects. Like, what are the cultural and social and economic conditions that led to the creation of such an ethos among so many people? And he's writing about this with incredibly compelling insights, like flashes of brilliance in that article that startled me. And to tell you the truth, I mean, he's a professor of Hispanic history and a specialist in early modern Spain. I think he's considers himself to be on the far left, and I've spent many evenings with him, and we've never really gotten into that subject, actually. It's like, so I don't really know, and I don't really care. I think what we need is like a reset right now, where we stop caring about these tribes and these intellectual games and these factions and these parlor games, and we need to start taking ideas seriously and figure out what it is we're supposed to believe as human beings. And the intellectuals can help us discover that. And those intellectuals might be from the left, from the right, or from the center. I don't care. What we need to like push a lot of these ideological concerns aside, in my view, to revisit the foundations of what it means to be a thriving, happy, coherent society where people have human rights. That's, to me, the goal we need right now.
In just a bit, we're going to give people an opportunity to find out how they learn more about the Brownstone Institute. I'm going to give them a sneak peek in this next question, because going to your website, there is a particular line that stood out to me, a number of them, but one that in particular stood out to me. The world needs the Brownstone Institute now to prevent the next snap lockdown and make the case for an open and free society. Do you really agree that this is needed right now, a group that's going to be making this case?
Yeah, we have to, because our rights and freedoms cannot be contingent upon the exigencies of time and place. I mean, we need to develop a new cultural consensus that rights are inalienable. That we have to have freedom of movement, and the freedom of association is non-negotiable. We should be able to open businesses and expect that they can stay open, that we can start a church and invite people in. That in our homes, we have to be able to have as many people in them as possible. It seems incredible to me that we would have had almost all across the country limits on the number of people you can have in your own house. Now, that is not what freedom is about. And I don't care what the crisis is. Somebody said to me the other day in an interview, they were talking about Neil Ferguson's outrageous predictions of 2 or 3 million dead from COVID-19, 3 or 4% case fatality rates and that kind of stuff. And it's true, all those things were crazy and they were generated out of models. But what I told the interviewer is, I said, let's say that all those things ended up being true. I mean, the real question we need to ask is, I would say two. Are the means we're using to fix the problem the right ones? In other words, what would government's shutdowns been able to achieve anyway? We know from the empirical record that there's no difference in the virus trajectory based on mitigation strategies. We know this already. So that's the first question. Is the policy going to work? And the second one is, I think, even more profound. Should we do it anyway? Is it right? Is it moral? Is it correct to have, do you want to live in a society in which you have an elite group of planners who can rule your life and treat you like a lab rat? I mean, is that the kind of world we want to live in?
Well, if people would like to learn more about the work of the Brownstone Institute, you certainly have information posted on your website. How can people find what you're doing?
I would love it if people would subscribe, get on the email list. I'm not sending out too many things right now. It's maybe about once a week whenever I get around to it. But we have browser notifications. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, and send us a note. I'm looking for financial support right now. It's actually, people have been extremely generous to Brownstone right now. The other thing to remember is that one of the reasons to support Brownstone right now is that, and I'll just tell you this, it's just true, many scientists and academics and intellectuals are being fired from their positions at universities and research labs and hospitals and scientific establishments for standing up against these mandates, unscientific and really unwarranted mandates, and they're standing up for principle. They need an outlet and they need a home. They need a safe harbor so that they're not punished for their courage anymore. And Brownstone is being called upon right now, even though we're so new, we're being called upon, I would say morally called upon, and strategically so, to take on some of these people and give them a venue and give them an opportunity to write and think and continue to thrive and be free and to help rebuild after these catastrophic lockdowns. So we definitely need moral support, financial support. Sharing our articles is a dream for me. I'm very excited about the work we're doing right now. I don't know, people ask me, is it going to work? I don't know, but I know for sure that if we don't do something right now, we will definitely lose. So to me, this is the time to stand up, be heard, be counted, do serious work, think seriously about these topics, get involved. Civilization in many ways is weakening, it's under threat. There's ways in which it possibly is sweeping towards a real bad point. And we're all called upon to do our best right now to stop that.
Jeffrey Tucker is founder and president of the Brownstone Institute. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks so much for interviewing me. Thank you.